to order, please. Thank you. Our first order of business is swearing in the elected trustees. Christine is not present this evening because she is ill. So we will begin by swearing in trustee-elect Don Erickson. Don, if you would please go stand right there by Harry.
Am I supposed to take this with me?
No, you leave that right there. I'll be fine. Thank you.
Actually, Carol, if you'd like, they could all stand up and just do it one time.
One time?
I would like to do it individually, if that's all right.
No, that's perfect.
Thank you.
Please raise your right hand. I state your name, do solemnly swear
I, Don Erickson, solemnly swear
that I will support
that I will support
the Constitution and laws of the United States,
the Constitution and laws of the United States,
the Constitution and laws of the State of Wyoming,
the Constitution and laws of the State of Wyoming,
and that I will faithfully,
that I will faithfully,
honestly, and impartially
honestly, and impartially
discharge the duties of trustee
discharge the duties of trustee
of the District Board of Trustees
of the District Board of Trustees
of Laramie County Community College
of Laramie County Community College
to the best of my ability and understanding.
to the best of my ability and understanding.
So help me God.
So help me God. Thank you.
Next, we will swear in trustee-elect Bill Du Bois.
Raise your right hand and repeat after me. I state your name, do solemnly swear
I, Bill Du Bois, do solemnly swear
that I will support
that I will support
the Constitution and laws of the United States,
the Constitution and laws of the United States,
the Constitution and laws of the State of Wyoming,
the Constitution and laws of the State of Wyoming,
that I will faithfully, honestly, and impartially
honest and impartially,
discharge the duties of trustee
discharge the duties of trustee
of the District Board of Trustees
of the District Board of Trustees
of Laramie County Community College
of Laramie County Community College
to the best of my ability and understanding.
to the best of my ability and understanding.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Congratulations.
And load it up from Joe and Vicki.
Very good. And next, we will have trustee-elect Ed Mosier.
Long walk there.
Please raise your right hand and repeat after me. I state your name, do solemnly swear
I, Ed Mosier, do solemnly swear
that I will support
that I will support
the Constitution and laws of the United States,
the Constitution and the laws of the United States,
the Constitution and laws of the State of Wyoming,
the Constitution and laws of the State of Wyoming,
that I will faithfully,
that I will faithfully,
honestly, and impartially
honestly, and impartially
discharge the duties of trustee
discharge the duties of trustee
of the District Board of Trustees
of the District Board of Trustees
of Laramie County Community College
of Laramie County Community College
to the best of my ability and understanding.
to the best of my ability and understanding.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Congratulations.
If I could ask those three trustees to please gather back by the screen briefly because we wanted to take a picture of them. The wingspan wants a picture. And if you could take your signed form and drop it off to Vicki at this time, please. Thank you. Yes. You get to do the fun stuff. So if anyone wants to get a drink of water or something while they're getting their picture taken, that would be fine.
I don't know where she went.
Back by the screen back here.
Go back here.
See how well they listen. That was Christine.
You can hide part of me behind you.
They wanted a picture. I think it's a solemn occasion. Okay. Our next order of business is elections. I would like first to...
Madam Chairman, I'd like to move that Carol Merrill be the president of this LCCC Board of Trustees.
How about the chairman?
Chairman, whatever.
Thank you. Are there any other nominations?
I second that nomination.
Would there be any other nominations? I would like to call for the question. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, that was a little awkward.
You got abstain from voting, did you?
I don't know. Sure. Okay, the next nomination would be for the vice chairman. Any nominations from the floor?
Madam Chairwoman, I nominate Kevin Kilty as vice chairman.
Second.
Any other nominations?
Is he willing to accept?
I am.
Okay.
I guess that's a good question. Are there any other nominations? There not being any, I would like to call for the question. All those in favor of Dr. Kevin Kilty for vice chair, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay,
Madam Chairwoman,
congratulations.
I have something that I have to say.
Oh,
I just
yes.
have to say this. I remember several years ago when I was first elected trustee, Dr. Kevin Kilty stopping me in the hallway and saying, "There's some things I need to talk to you about." And at that moment, I never would have dreamed in a million years that I would be sitting here nominating Kevin Kilty as vice chair of the board. Isn't life fun and strange?
You should know in America, anything is possible. Madam Chairman, I'd like to top that, you see. He called me in Chicago to talk to me about my plan for the board.
That does top mine, Bill.
You got it. Very good. Next person to be nominated would be for secretary. Are there any nominations?
Madam Chair, I'd like to nominate Bill DuBois for that position.
Do I have a second?
I second that nomination.
Are there any other nominations from the floor? Are there any other nominations from the floor? If not, I call for the question. All those in favor of Bill DuBois for secretary, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Thank you. And our last officer to be nominated would be for treasurer. Do I have any nominations?
Madam Chair, I nominate Ed Mosier as treasurer.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Are there any other nominations from the floor? Are there any other nominations from the floor? There being none, I will call for the question. All those in favor of Ed Mosier for treasurer, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. I've just been notified that we do not need a second for these nominations.
Okay.
Thank you, Kevin. I didn't
Thanks,
think
Kevin.
so. Okay, now next is B3 Foundation Board Representatives. I think pretty much we've made that decision, and I'll check with those present. I would like to continue in that placement, and I think Bill would as well. And we have asked Don if he would like to serve with us.
I'd be happy to.
Good, great.
Is that okay with the rest of the board?
Yes.
Very good.
And then we have C, which is 2 WACCT members, and
Well, Ed Mosier should be one because he's already been there.
absolutely.
So that's
Yes,
foregone conclusion.
I'd be happy to serve there, and I'd like to nominate or have Brenda Little also serve with that, and perhaps Kevin Kilty would be willing. I know it doesn't show here, but given the fact that we need to have people who can vote at those meetings as board of directors, I'd like to have Kevin, if he would choose to be an alternate.
I'd be happy to.
Is there any discussion on that? I think that that's a really wise decision, because then we have 3 strong people to go and represent us at the state level. Okay, that sounds great. Is there anything else anyone would like to say during this special business meeting? Okay.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
May I introduce my sidekick?
Oh, please do that.
My sidekick of 53 years, coming up next month. Jackie is sitting over here with me.
Please stand up, Jackie. Nice to meet
We've been
you.
together through a lot of good times with our children, and she said, "Go for it, Don," when I told her I was going to run for community college. She said, so here I am. She's the one that helped me.
Thank you, Don. Okay, I'd like to adjourn this meeting, and we'll go into our regular business meeting, post haste. Okay. I'm calling to order the regular business meeting of the Laramie County Community College. I'm sorry? Study session. Thank you for correcting me, I need that, Vicki. Okay, December 5th, 2012. Let's see, let me get to the right place here. The first order of business is the capital campaign at special election, which I believe Lisa is going to present.
Madam Chair, congratulations on your new appointment.
Thank you, Lisa.
I would like to call your attention to the blue book that you have in front of you. It is our facilities plan building forward. Don, I would like to welcome you as our newest trustee, and this is going to be maybe your first introduction to this book. If it is, I would like to welcome you to our
I've
facilities
looked at
plan.
it very closely.
Oh, good. Okay, very good. Well, I will be referring to this tonight. I would like to hand out While Carol is helping me to hand out a document, I would like to introduce Dan Baxter. Dan Baxter is here tonight with Kaiser Corporation, and I would like to thank him. He helped us with the 2006 bond election for the Health Science Building. For those of you who are with us, you will remember that he was a great asset and a great help to us in giving us advice and guidance during that campaign. And so I'm going to ask him to lead my sidekick tonight, and he's going to be here to give us advice and help us answer any questions. So Dan is here as a reference and to help us. And he's going to turn off his cell phone. You know, Madam Chair, now that I'm in charge of the foundation, I would like to make a suggestion to you that we used to have on the Board of Trustees.
Yeah.
If anyone's cell phone rang, they used to have to give $10 to the foundation. So just something for you to think about. Although Dan is a loyal donor to the foundation already, he gives much more than that, so.
I was going to suggest that sounds like an awfully small penalty for him.
But when I first started at the college in '05, that was a rule. If anyone's cell phone rang in here, they had to give the foundation $10, so. It's hard to collect. It was really hard to collect, but it was a fun rule anyway, so. So I would call your attention to this document that Carol just helped me to hand out. And I know that Dr. Schaefer gave you a summary back in November, and I'm sorry that Mr. Erickson was not here, but just to bring you all up to speed, you all passed this blue book, the Building Forward Plan, on May 16th of 2012. And so really, this is the trustees' plan, and I want to let you know that we have been working on this and talking about the different strategies that we need to move forward with this. So I want to talk to you a little bit first about campaign support. And getting the Board of Trustees is essential to this success. So if you'll take a look at that first part of this document, we really want to talk to you tonight about getting the Board of Trustees on board and making sure that this is your number one priority. And I know that these top 2 buildings are, and we just want to make sure that you're ready to move forward. So we need to know about your commitment tonight, and we want to make sure that we're ready to answer your questions. Taking a look at the block there that you see, the structure for success, there are 3 things, including the building the case. We're ready to conduct research to define and determine the needs for these 2 buildings. and develop the mission and message of why we need them. And then we'll be ready to move into the election campaign. A bond election is important for both of these projects, and in order to do that, we're going to need to build our information and education campaign and take it out to the community. And then we need to generate the excitement for the community to help us make this campaign successful. And the third piece of that, of course, is private giving. And we'll need to generate some funds for both the Flex Tech building and hopefully for the Student Services building. So we'll need to identify some donors for that. So we move on to the campaign committee, and that's where you all come into play. I've had some conversations with Dan Baxter about this. And when we worked on the health science campaign, we had a very small but hearty group of campaign workers. And we had about a dozen people that really came together and hit it really hard. We knocked on every door between here and Pine Bluffs. And there were a lot of people that really got behind it in the community. And when we talked to Dan about this, he said we need at least 50. So we're going to need a much bigger core group that run the steering committee, that run the speaker committee, the voter information committee, all of these different committees. We're going to need a much heartier group to make this happen. As you look at these bond election numbers and the price tags on both the University Student Center and the Flex Tech, they're at least double what the cost of that health science building was. So we're going to need to rally more support and a lot more momentum behind these campaigns to make this happen. So we really want to get behind this and make sure that all of the people in this room and the people on this campus, the people in this community are ready to get behind it. So we want to make sure that we build the momentum for this project. So taking a look at the next steps, what we would like to propose to you is that in January, we would put together a survey, or a poll, if you will, to evaluate the support in our community and to determine the timeline. In talking with Dan, it would cost us about $12,000 to take a survey of the community and establish where they are in terms of supporting the college. If reasonable support is determined, then the campaign could be developed. And basically what we would do is work with the Public Relations Department in a similar fashion that we did for the health science campaign. We developed a video, all of the campaign materials, brochures, flyers, and we would go out into the community and visit with all of the groups, the various groups, Rotary, Lions, Kiwanis, all of the community groups, and really get out and sell the buildings and sell our message. And we have so much support in this community. We talk so much about how much our community supports us and loves this college. I think the support is out there, but we really need to find out how much, and the survey would tell us that. So that would be about $12,000. So in maybe May or June, then we would do a second survey after spending the whole spring semester sharing that message with the community. With that second survey, we could see how much difference we've made. If the numbers are positive, then the decision could be made to move forward, and then the Board of Trustees could make that decision to call for that special election. Dan and I met with the county clerk, Debbie Lathrop, and originally she had said that the bond election, a special election, would cost $85,000. So Dan and I went and met with her, and I really appreciate Dan making that appointment and asking her if she could reduce that cost, perhaps by consolidating some of the polling places or trimming the costs in any way that she could. And she sharpened her pencil, and she was able to get that number down to $75,450. So the cost reduced by $10,000. That does help, but it is still a very heavy price tag. So there is a lot of risk involved, and we understand that, and so that's why we feel like taking those polls in the community will really help us to better understand the risks that we're taking. So at that time, we would be able to give you a much better indication about whether you would want to make that risk and call for that special election. So you don't need to make that decision until July 15th. So you've got some time before you need to make that decision. So if the numbers weren't there, if the polls came in and they weren't favorable, then you all could make the decision to wait until the 2014 general election.
I see that there are many questions here.
There absolutely are. And I just want to remind you that Dr. Schaefer is here, and Dan Baxter is here, and I'm happy to answer questions as well. But we are here to answer questions, and I know that there will be many. So that's basically, these are the the issues that we have, so.
Madam Chair.
Trustee Kelty?
With regard to consolidating the voting places, is there any idea that that might actually hurt or help a bond issue?
Madam Chair and Dr. Kilty, Debbie Lathrop said that there is no way of consolidating any of the polling places.
Okay.
She was unable to do that, and she didn't really indicate how she was able to sharpen from 85 to 75. She was just able to sharpen those numbers.
Fewer judges, I think.
Fewer judges.
The turnout might be a little less. Right?
Yeah, right, but she was not able to consolidate any of the polling places.
They do in some other counties, but it's just not, because they just went through reconsolidation here, Madam Chair, and they just don't want to confuse the voters again by telling them to go to a different polling place on special election. I think that was a real concern that she had.
Okay, good question. Trustee Mosier?
On the survey, I was just wondering, each of those surveys is $12,000?
That is correct. About 12,500, correct. Trustee Little?
Lisa, would the survey be for both buildings, or would there be a survey for each building?
Madam Chair and Trustee Little, we could craft the surveys to include all the questions that we want.
Okay.
We would be able to include the questions for both buildings.
Okay.
And we would be able to write the questions in any way that we would deem necessary. And we would hope that you, as the Board of Trustees, would assign someone to be on that committee to help us. So it sounds like the perfect committee for you. It sounds like we've got you signed up on the polling committee. Thank you.
Write that down, Vicki, please.
Thank you,
Madam
Lisa.
Chair.
Trustee Kelty.
The Flex Tech building is, the case for it is a little different than it is for the other building, because if we go back a year and a quarter to September 2011, when we were talking about this, I had the idea at the time that we were going to look for industry partners that would put up about half of the cost of that building, and in fact, I took half as really sort of the benchmark. And that means, in addition to the survey, we've got to dig up the industry partners who are willing to pony up that much money, or the bond issue would be a moot point at that point, yes? So, do we have a drop-dead date for finding these industry partners?
Dan, can you help me out with that one?
Madam Chair, I certainly think, I agree with Mr. Kilty's comments that, that the college needs to move forward right away and identify the partners and gauge as to how much support you can get or can expect from them prior to the time the board would call for a bond election in July. So, I mean, we've talked about that, and we think that's a great idea, and we need, that's something we're going to have to start working on right away. With regard to the bond election, really, I do have a handout, an extensive handout on costs and timelines and things. If you want to get into that now, we can do it later. But when you call for an election, you essentially set the maximum authorization that you'd be asking voters to approve. And you can, within the bond question, you can be very specific and say we're going to be issuing GO bonds for all or a portion of the Student University Center or the Flex Tech building or other things. Or you could put in there and say that you're going to be using bond proceeds for the purposes of constructing facilities on the campus that are consistent with your master plan. I mean, you've got all kinds of flexibility in how you want to structure, and that's one of the things we need to investigate further through the surveys and work with the board as to how do you want to craft the bond question, how do you want to present it to the people. A lot of good news. I mean, you've probably heard things here locally as far as sales tax and other things are improving, but one of the other good things, your tax base went up by 6% this year. So your bonding capacity now is up to 40 million instead of 38 million. So you have 40 million in capacity. The other thing we've had is the interest rates are still the lowest level they've been in 40 years. And so right now, even if you went, with a $40 million bond issue, and I know you're not talking about that, but that's even if you went and asked for the total capacity, you're only talking 2.6 mils to pay that back over about a 20-year period. So a very small increase due, one, to your $1 billion tax base, and two, due to very low interest rates. So the cost to an average homeowner is going to be like a little over $40 a year. I mean, even for a $40 million bond issue. So, obviously we're not talking that much right now. We're looking at much smaller than that for the Flex Tech Student Center. I just solicit some of the things we need to talk to you about and figure out, well, how much do we go out for? And if voters approve it, it's just authorization. You can go ahead and sell that authorization over a 3, 4, or 5-year period as grant funding comes in line, for like the Flex Tech building, state funding becomes available for the Student Center, or maybe for the Fine Arts Center. And then, so when that grant funding is in place, that's when you sell bonds, maybe for $10 million out of that $40 million or $30 million authorization. So we have a lot of flexibility in how we do it, and we don't have to sell those bonds until this board is comfortable that, we got the other funding in place that we're comfortable with, and then we'll sell bonds for 50% of the project or 60 or 75%. But the nice thing about having that bond authorization there is that, if you don't quite raise as much money privately as you had hoped, I mean, you still have the bond authorization, so you can get your project done. And the main thing, which really can cost projects and issuers, is keep the project on a timeline where you can get it done as quickly as possible, get it constructed as soon as possible, because the real cost isn't the bonding, it's really the construction cost increases if you have to delay it 1 or 2 years, right? I mean, I remember some years, I've been in the business a long time, where we would have increases in construction costs of 15-20% in a year. So obviously we don't have that right now. Things are pretty stable, but it can happen. So, and the other thing, of course, is getting these projects in use if they're needed. I mean, we say they're needed in the master plan. Get them in use by the college and for the benefit of the students as quickly as possible. That's the other thing that's good. So you truly have a lot of options that we had recommended earlier this year, about GO bond. Since you are debt-free right now and have been for 5 years, it would be a good place to start to raise some funds locally. And if we do get the voters' authorization and okay to have that help us with your master plan projects, that puts, I think, the college in a better position to ask for other funding from the state as we go down the line.
Don't go anywhere,
I'm
Dan.
not-
Don't go anywhere. We have a
That's
few
my
more
question.
Go
questions.
anywhere, Dan.
Trustee Rivers.
Madam Chairwoman, so Dan, as an example then, to make sure I'm understanding right, we could go to the voters and ask for an election of, say, up to 36 or up to $40 million in bonds.
Right.
Then, if we get the authorization to sell up to that amount from the voters, and we could word it something like up to that amount, right?
Absolutely.
Then we can go out to private industry and say, look at this. We have the backing of our voters for this project. Could you put in $3 million for this building? And then we take the $3 million off of the bond price tag. So then we would say go after 33 million.
That certainly is one approach, although I would encourage the board that with regard to private funding on the Flex Tech bill, we want to start on that right away. I mean, provided the board is comfortable with the project and you definitely want to do it, then I think we'd want to start identifying those partners right away and see whether we have some private support out there. And that would make, I think, the board feel better if you had some private partners out there willing to come up with some money before going to the voters. So, but the approach you're talking about would also work, but depending upon where you are in the process, fortunately, we got a lot of time here, so we can be working on those things if the board wants, college should be doing that.
That makes sense. Thanks, Dan. I
Sure.
understand now what you're saying.
Trustee Kilty?
Madam Chair, at the time we put the question to the voters, do we specify what the interest these bonds would carry at that time?
Maximum interest rate.
Maximum.
So maximum interest rate the bonds can be sold at, so it's a very good point, Dr. Kilty. We've got to be careful in setting that rate. especially if we're thinking that we're going to be selling the bonds in series over 3 or 4 years, as interest rates, can go up pretty quickly. You've probably noticed that in your lifetime, they can go up pretty quick. So we'll probably need to put, we won't be putting 2% in the bond question. We might be putting, 5 or 4.5, something we'll have to talk to the board about. Because right now, interest rates are exceedingly low on 20-year AA rating. You have great credit, you have a AA credit rating, which is the best in the state, and then general obligation bonds backed by the full faith and credit of the tax base. So, you're looking at an average rate right now, even for 20-year paper, in the 2% range. I mean, it's incredibly low. I mean, so it's a great time if you have a need to issue fixed-rate debt.
But in the worst possible case, interest rates would rise quickly. We wouldn't net as much out of the bond sale as we thought.
Well, you could go ahead and, you can certainly sell those bonds anytime after, let's say we had an election on November 5th, 2013. You could sell bonds as early as December of 2013, whether it's for, 10 million or 40 million if you want. The question is, can we spend it? That much money within 3 years is what is required under the federal tax rules. And our project's lined up, and we have good cost estimates, and is that the way to go? So what I'm suggesting is, we might want to build lots of flexibility in the bond question, and then, if we're ready to go with 10 or 20 million, right after the election, we do that and get those projects done. And then you have the bond authorization there that would allow you then to proceed as quickly as possible with planning for the other master plan priorities as far as architectural planning, getting the cost estimates, and then maybe 6 months, a year down the road, you do another series of bonds to provide maybe 50% of the financing from that, provided the following April, we get some money from the legislature to hopefully take care of it, so, half or whatever they're willing to do.
Trustee Mosier?
You bring up something that's kind of a concern to me that you may be able to clean up real quickly, and that is when we talk about expending that in a time frame of 3 years, whatever bonded amount we might choose to.
Once the bonds are issued.
Yeah, I'm concerned, would we be far enough along in our process that with the capital construction group in there now from the state, would we be in trouble in the time of that process? Because I know they're slowing some of those projects down.
Maybe this is a point of clarification. The bond authorization is good indefinitely, but once you sell the bonds, so you sell 10 million, federal tax laws require you to sign a certificate at closing saying that it's your intent to try to spend that within 3 years. The bond, usually, but you're usually looking at 18 months, 24 months to spend that initial tranche of bonds. But certainly the original question that would be approved in November, that authorization is good indefinitely. I mean, even for 10 years. But as you mentioned, Dr. Kilty, if interest rates go up, we put a maximum rate of interest of 4% in the bond question, and the prevailing rates in the market are 5 or 6, that you prohibitively would be blocked from selling those bonds because the question approved by the voters is too low. So that's a reason why we want to build some flexibility in the bond question if you want to take that approach as a board.
Madam Chair, to Trustee Mosier's question, it's actually a good one. Under the current timeline, if we went to the voters with a special election in the fall of 2013 for the University and Student Center, our plan is to ask the legislature to approve both Level 3 funding and then construction funding. That approval of the construction funding would not happen until the spring of 2015. So because they are tied and one without the other really does not necessarily give us enough money to do the project, we most likely would not sell those bonds until we had some indication from the legislature that they would indeed approve those dollars. So even if we have the authorization in 2013, the likelihood that I could ever make a recommendation to you to sell those in December of 2013 or even in the spring of 14 would be very, very slim because we would be asking the voters to go into debt when we do not have a guarantee for the full revenues needed to build that project.
Thank you.
Madam Chair. As a newbie, new kid on the block here, I have a couple questions. I think Dan answered one of them. It has to do with the cost. The university student center is estimated to be 36 million, and the Flex Tech, I believe, is 10 million. Is it
26, is it 26 million, Dr. Schaefer?
okay? All right, I saw a 3 instead of a 2, thank you.
That's all right.
No problem, that's a little better. All right, 26 million and then 10 million. Those are projections on today's construction costs or projected in the future. And I think you indicated that construction costs have been low, has been somewhat steady here for the last couple of years.
Yeah, it has been due to, and I guess from my conversations with architects, I mean, that's not my area of expertise.
But this particular figure can change, okay? And also can change by what the architects do, okay, with it, okay? The other question I have is on the need. I wasn't here, and I think it was in May that you came together and came up with the priorities and determined the needs for these buildings, of which the 2 we're talking about right now. And I'm a little bit perplexed by this statement here on the building the case. It says, conduct research to define and determine the needs for the student services building and Flex Tech building. I would assume that those needs have been identified and are part of the overall building plan. So the phraseology of that statement leads me to think that we don't know the need for those 2 projects when we do, I would assume.
Yeah, Madam Chair, Trustee Erickson, for your purposes, each of those components reflect the activities that are associated with each of those components, building the case, election campaign, private giving, conducting the research to define and determine the need. We've already done that.
That's been completed.
Correct. Yeah, it's just a component of building the case for these projects.
Thank you.
And in fact, you can recall our study session, your last study session, when we had the conversation about the programs that would potentially go in the Flex Tech building, and also my comments that we may actually have to do something sooner than when we'll have this Flex Tech building to respond to the needs for process engineering programming as well as welding programming going on right now. So the need is in front of us, and I know that I could ask Vice President Judy Hay to tell you about the needs for consolidated and new space for student services. I mean, this is something we could have used last year, and I really am not worried at all about making the case for the need, to be quite honest with you.
I had assumed that, but I was somewhat perplexed by the way the phraseology here. So what you're saying, okay, this is a paradigm to follow, and that part's already been done.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. I did have a question myself. Is there a certain amount of private money that has to be raised, kind of in a, like 10% of the total project, or 2%? Is there anything like that built in?
No, I mean, you could
No.
fund, the 100% of it with a bond issue, which has been how, I think the science building was funded 100% from bond proceeds, was it not?
Correct.
Lisa? Yeah.
Okay.
So obviously, if we can get some help from the state or help from private donors and reduce the cost to the taxpayers, that would be a nice thing.
Okay.
Madam Chair, just a point of clarification. That is the case. We could ask the local taxpayers to fund the projects in their entirety. If we want to ask the state for funding for these projects, and that is our intent, to ask the state to fund half of the construction associated with the student center, it requires that we come up with half of the money from somewhere else. It's actually 50%, or, Carol, I never remember.
6 mils.
6 mils versus the construction cost. And so before we can go to the legislature for construction dollars, which again will happen in, the process will get started in 2014, but ultimately the legislature would have to consider that in the spring of 2015. We have to, or should have, I believe we have to, for construction, have that match or that part of the fund or the capital model satisfied. So we do have to have some dollars if we want to ask the state to kick those in. Those dollars do not have to be privately given. They can come from general bond elections.
Okay. Those are questions people are going to want to have the answers to, and we'll have the answers. And Lisa, is this something you're going to present to the foundation board tomorrow night?
Madam Chairman, yes, it is. Dr. Schaefer and I will present a similar discussion tomorrow night to the Foundation Board, and we will be asking them for similar support.
Yes, and will Dan be going with you as well?
I had not invited him yet. I would be happy to, if you suggest.
Happy to attend. I have another meeting, but what time is it?
5 o'clock.
I can make it 5 o'clock.
If you would like him to be there, that might be valuable.
I agree.
Or maybe you two have the answers, Lisa and Joe.
I think, Madam Chair, really for tonight, what we wanted to stress to you and outline to you is the structure and the process and where we're at. So what we see here is really the three components of the campaign, and indeed, to your comment, Dr. Kilty, private giving is an element of this, and I would actually suggest it'll be a priority for the Flex Tech, but will also be considered from an opportunity perspective for the Student Center, University Center. There's three components. One of the first things that Associate Vice President Murphy has proposed to us is that we go out soon and do the initial polling. And that initial polling is to try to get a sense in the community, where are you at on these projects? Would you fund them together differently? At what level? What type of tax? What would you prefer? It's to get an idea of where the community's at. And so in January, if we do this, and 80% come back negative towards them, and 20%, we may say, we don't want to rush into a special election in the fall of 2013. We've got more work to do there. It may come back that it's very favorable, even if it's a slight margin towards the negative. That may suggest let's plow ahead and go ahead and capitalize on the low interest rates and move through and do the special election. So that research piece is one of the first things we'll be doing and very important to this process. The second piece, and I think where Lisa is really coming from, is the development of the campaign structure, and that's going to start with the campaign committee, the steering committee. And I believe you are asking the trustees, are we committed to these projects, and are you willing to serve in capacity on the steering committee and other committees as they're formed in this campaign structure? Is that a fair statement?
That is very fair, Dr. Schaefer. Thank you.
So I know that we as a board will not vote here because we cannot vote during this, thank you, Vicki, study session. But just as a straw poll, are we willing to go ahead and support this project? All those in favor, just as the madam. Would you just raise your hand, please, if you would like to continue with this project?
I'd like to speak to my raising my hand.
Please.
The reason I ran for this particular position was to do whatever I could with my background in the community and my knowledge of organization to help the college get this building plan forward. So I'm definitely 100% behind it. I do have some questions that come up, and Brenda, this is your fault. Brenda says, if you have a question, don't let it hold. Say
That's
it.
right.
I'm feeling a sense of putting the cart before the horse. That we have not presented to the community the need for these particular projects, and going for a survey to ask them, okay, do we need this? It seems to me that that's putting the cart before the horse, that we should take some time to educate the community about why these are needed projects. The things that you said the other day at the study session, Dr. Joe, about why we need a flex tech, why we need to look at developing some more room for welding and bringing welding back, those kinds of things. That, I think, needs to get out to the community prior to doing a survey. That would just be my initial reaction to hearing this at this point.
Yeah, and Madam Chair, Trustee Erickson, I probably wasn't clear. I agree with you wholeheartedly. I think we've made our case in very small circles, and we need to make the case in a much broader area. We would actually plan to do two types of polls. The initial poll is to gauge a sense of where the community is at to help us develop the campaign and determine the timeline at which we might go out to the voters and ask them for their support from this. as we mature in the campaign, after we've put the case statement together, we've done the circuit in town, we've presented to the groups, we've been out there and really making that case, we intend to go back and poll again. That poll will be more specific to the design of the bond question, to the amounts that we might use or might suggest the voters consider, to some of the other structures that go into it. So we'll actually do polling twice, but this initial one is to help us answer the question, should we have an election in November, or should we hold it off until November of 2014? So we fully understand and anticipate that the community will not be as aware of the case as they will after we've been out in the community making that case and we go back to them with a refined question. This is simply to help us gauge where the community is at right now and to give us some indication of whether or not we could feasibly pull this off in a year or if it's going to take more time. Because to meet our timeline, we could feasibly, without holding up anything with these projects, at least with the University and Student Center, go to the voters in 2014 and still keep our timeline for that project. If we were to raise $5 million for the Flex Tech building, it may hold off that project, but we could do that. And if the reception we get from this initial polling is that we got a lot of work to do, I may recommend to you that we do that and actually take 2 years. So we'll be doing it twice. Think of it maybe as a pre and post test type of element to it. But it's to gather that sense. We could certainly move, if it was your direction as a board, if you wanted to just say, let's just plow through it, let's go, let's get out there, and we could certainly move through, forego the polling in January, go out, make the case, and do all that, go out and poll closer to the spring, or I think we could even still do it in June.
Prior to calling.
Prior to calling it. And then go forward. It just may be that we'll be under a short timeline to decide, do you call that vote or not? And so I'm erring on the side of being a little bit more prudent in doing 2 polling, even though the cost that I believe the foundation will graciously pick up for the polling is significant.
Madam Chair, may I continue?
Yes, please.
Will we, as a board, have an opportunity to see the content of the poll?
Oh, Madam Chair, Trustee Erickson, by all means. In fact, we hope to have you included in the design of the poll, being monitoring the process and certainly the results of the poll. And unless I'm missing something, I imagine we would have that conversation here at a board meeting or a study session.
And I think what I heard Lisa say is that she wanted a board member to be, and possibly two, I think she asked Brenda, and if you also would like to be included, that could happen. So we'll
wait on that for a while. Because you asked me to be on the foundation's going to have some responsibility here, too.
You could be on that from either side. Okay, Lisa.
Madam Chair, I would like to add to follow up to Trustee Erickson's question. I would like to say that Dr. Schaefer has been out in the community for the last year, and he has been talking about the master plan during some of his community group meetings. So the master plan is not a surprise to the community. This will be really a reevaluation to the community. So it won't be a surprise to them when we come back and tell them that now we're ready to move forward with our master plan. So I think when we go back to them this spring and tell them we're ready to move forward, this will be a review for them. So I just want to let you know that we have been out during the last year introducing them to Dr. Schaefer and to the master plan. So I want you to know that we have been prepping them.
And I think that's the perfect way to do it. Let the community know our plan and how we're going to proceed and be visible and honest. So, thank you.
Madam
Are
Chair.
there any more? Trustee Murphy?
And following with that, I'm kind of looking at this and wondering where we're at with regards to at least the steering committee, because as you talk about 50 people being involved here, and the foundation is going to hear about this, I'm wondering what you're seeking from the board relative to the involvement. I would assume the steering committee is the one that needs to come out right away, and I'm just wondering what that timeline is.
Yeah, I think what we're talking about there is when we actually, call for the election campaign, in July, if we go July next year, we'd want to have a steering committee set up, ahead of time, made up of board members and other community leaders within the area, within the county and the district. And so we're getting input from them, and they generally oversee the whole campaign. Once you get into the bond election campaign, if you pass your resolution in July, really we'll have an election campaign like you're all familiar with from really August 1st to November 5th, and so that's when the committee is going to be busy. Meeting maybe bi-weekly and just checking on, well, do we have our voter information brochures yet? Is our steering committee lined up to meet with Kiwanis or the different clubs and be available there as a resource to the media and voter information, the other subcommittees that, I'll come help your committee or come to the group and help speak to this question, along the way. So,
The part that you're leaving out is that you need really good tennis shoes for the neighborhood camp. And on the weekends.
You did mention that, did I?
I think you're sugarcoating.
I do think you said knocking on doors.
Knocking on doors. Oh, you did.
Some of that involved.
The really good stuff.
Madam Chair, I don't want to completely disagree with Mr. Baxter. This will prove that we weren't really coordinating any specific message here beforehand. I would actually suggest that the creation of the steering committee for the campaign will actually happen ASAP, because there is not only the bond election component of this campaign, there's the private giving, and that has a whole other facet of design, identification of potential donors, the time we spend with those folks. That committee needs to steer the entire campaign, of which a significant piece is indeed the bond election. From there, the other campaign or committee structures will come into place, membership and who will be on each of those committees will be developed as well. But I would suggest, and I will tell you that I will most likely ask Lisa to be moving on the establishment of a steering committee for the entire campaign as soon as possible. So I would anticipate seeing that formed probably early January. Yeah.
Perfect. Trustee Du Bois?
I just would like to say that in addition to Dr. Schaefer being on the community, our reporter, Aaron Curtis, has talked about this in at least 2 or 3 different columns. So it's out there, John, and the whole idea. She's got several of them.
Quite a bit, yeah.
It's the beginning, Madam Chair. I think it's a good beginning, and I'm pleased that we've got good support from our columnist. That's very good. When you're talking about the friends in the pack, I would think that we would want to have a friends committee that has at least one person from every precinct in this county. There are 61 counties. So when we're talking 50, I think we're really talking 61. So that we have the outreach. I'm serious. So that we have the outreach, because we have precincts that are strong, and we know where those precincts are that are strong, and we know where they are where we're weak. And all we have to do is probably go back and take a look at the College of Health Sciences back in 2006 and look at where we were weak and where we were strong, and most likely it'll stay that way unless we do something with an outreach. So I would push for a group that is much larger than 50. Yeah, at least 61. I'm kind of feeling like I'm being a Dr. Kilty here and kind of boring in on something, but I feel kind of strong.
Which one is he's the French committee?
That's the way I'm doing
I'm going to separate you two.
Thank you, Trustee Erickson. That's really good information, and I think we appreciate that. Any other questions? Any public comment or questions?
My only question would be, I guess we would like to hear that you're ready for us to move forward with this plan and that we have your support. I would like to just wrap it up with that.
Brenda? Madam Chairwoman, I personally am ready to say I agree we should move forward.
I believe this board is ready to move forward. Thank you very much for your presentation, Lisa.
Thank you, Madam
Dan? Next, board business is strategic planning by Dr. Joe Schaefer.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Congratulations. Congratulations to all the new officers, and welcome to the board, Trustee Erickson, and congratulations, Trustee Du Bois and Mosier, for your re-election. We've got a lot of exciting things ahead of us. One of those exciting things just happens to be strategic planning. As you know, we've had conversations about this in the past, and you have actually approved as your 5th priority for this year to review, update, or go through a strategic planning process process. And my goal and my hope is to help facilitate that process for you as trustees as well as the institution. I think one of the things that will really help jumpstart the campus's progress into a very positive future is a clear vision and direction for where we're going as an institution, and I truly believe we are there. So, handed out to you tonight, and you should each have a copy of this. There's a front and back handout that's titled Planning for Strategic Planning. And that's really the conversation that I want to have with you folks tonight, is just getting us started and helping me understand your thoughts on strategic planning, and also propose to you a general structure, some concepts about it. So I have 3 objectives. I want to talk a little bit, and then I really want to hear from you. The first one is that I want to suggest a structure for our institutional planning. And I'm going out on a limb here a little bit, because I'll admit I haven't dug that deeply into the vernacular, the language we've used, the system we've used historically on our planning. I think the structure that I'm sort of proposing here fits. At least that's my hope, and I guess we'll find out. But I want to just propose that. I wanted to talk a little bit about what the process will look like, timeline, and more specifically where we need the board's involvement and where management's involvement will be, and try to get an understanding of that. And then lastly, I just have some questions that I want you to consider and give me some feedback so I can facilitate this process. So let me start with a handout. I'm going to breeze through this stuff relatively quickly so that we can have more of a dialogue than a presentation. The first thing is just a proposed structure for the levels of institutional planning. And at this level, I'm really talking about the macro level plans, the strategic plan of the college, and then also how we would structure operational plan or plans for the college specifically. So under the strategic plan, there's 4 levels. Our mission statement, our vision statement, strategic goals, and strategic outcomes. And I outline what those are here. I think we're pretty familiar with our mission statement. It's intended to describe what we do, who we do it for, and why we do it. Vision statement really has to coincide with the strategic planning process, because our vision for our future will change as our strategic plan changes and we look forward. The strategic goals are really those broad goals, the things that we're trying to accomplish. And then the strategic outcomes are essentially the metrics or the measures that will illustrate that we've met those goals or we're attaining those goals. So if the goals are more qualitative in their design, the metrics are supposed to be what we agree are the key indicators of the fact that we're actually trying to achieve that. That will comprise the strategic plan. Underneath that, there will be operational strategies and objectives. Those are the things that management will do, that I ultimately will work with the campus to identify, and these are the things of how we leverage all these great resources that LCCC has to help accomplish the goals, and ultimately our vision, and ultimately say we're meeting our mission. And so that's the structure, the levels of planning, and the general structure of planning that I'm proposing. And I'll pause there to see if there's any thoughts, feedback, comments, or if you want me to keep going.
Dr. Kilty?
Didn't we just recently revise our mission and vision statements? Are they already out of date? Has the world changed on us?
Madam Chair, Trustee Kilty, we did do that, and I was not here, so I don't have the exact date, but somebody in the audience will tell me when, 2010, 11?
I believe AQUIP worked on that, and Bill, you might remember there, it was part of a project there, and we did a vision statement. I don't think we redid the mission, but Roz, if you want. She's caught up in the media world there. Yeah, the reason I would like to, Madam Chair, bug Roz,
Mission statement.
mission vision, because we worked on that through AQUIP, but tell me, what did we wind up with? The vision or the mission did we redo?
Everything.
Okay.
And that was about a year ago, and I'm not online, but so say that.
Okay, it's about a year ago, according to Roz.
So now that we've settled that, those statements are no longer viable? They need to be changed? Do you have specific concerns about them?
Madam Chairwoman, may I speak just a moment? If I remember properly, when we went through that process of the vision and mission statement and the strategic planning, there was a lot of I want to use the word hodgepodge, but the goals and things were not necessarily written in a very concise manner. And we kept talking about how we were going to go back and look at it, and I'm not sure that was quite done. I personally think it would be a good idea, now that we have a new president and a new board, I think it would be a very good idea for us that maybe we should look once again at that mission and vision statement, have that strategic plan in front of us once again, because I think we're going to want to fix it, in my opinion, and make it much more concise and really mean something. I got the sense from the one we have now, I'm not sure that it really means anything. It was just more like a way to ask the president to check in on us, to check in with us. So I would say we need to look at those documents again.
Okay.
And Madam Chair, Dr. Kilty, what Trustee Little has said, I suggest we review those. I actually think our mission statement is quite well-written. I think it's pertinent to the organization, and I'm fond of it. So am I suggesting that needs to be changed? No. One of the things that I will encourage you as a board to do as we get into a cycle of strategic planning, which will include an annual review and possibly an update of the strategic plan, will be to consider reviewing our mission statement as we go. I do believe, while the vision statement is a fine statement, the vision statement needs to be developed, reviewed, and changed in context of the strategic plan. And so I do think that needs to be reviewed and looked at as we develop this strategic plan for the institution. And then the values, that really is a conversation that we can look at. So the process and the levels I'm suggesting will engage us, and you'll see one of the questions I have on the back, do we need to look at the mission statement? And that's where I want to hear some of your feedback.
Vicki.
Thank you, Dr.
Madam
Schultz.
Chair.
Yes.
Further question then, if we look at this structure, as you put it, for this strategic plan, I'm guessing that the foundation for this thing then is really the strategic outcomes, and we work backward toward the mission from there. Is that what you're talking about?
No, Madam Chair, Dr. Kilty, not necessarily. So our mission statement, by its design, encompasses really what we're trying to do, and it's really to help people change their lives through the power of learning. They're intended to be sort of esoteric statements that are supposed to help us strive for something greater. The vision statement, though, can have more purpose and more specific, and the strategic goals. Through the process that I will sort of walk you through or suggest that we would go through, the first piece in that process is to inform ourselves of what is the context we're living in. So that includes gathering information from the community, inside, outside, looking at the overall context of higher education, doing a SWOT analysis, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats type analysis. That informs us, and we need to be informed of where we're at now and match that with where our aspirations are. And that's why the vision and those goals need to really be developed in a collaborative partnership way with the college and the trustees, and those will help us develop these plans. The outcomes and how we measure that then, the strategic outcomes, those come after we say, okay, if we want to do X because our vision is to be this, how are we going to know if we got there? So I'm actually suggesting vision and the strategic goals come first. The mission statement is really our guidepost. And as we're having these conversations, we have to say, how does that fit with our mission? And if it doesn't, then we need to reevaluate whether or not we're on the right track with our vision and our goals, or we need to say, does our mission need to be reviewed?
Okay.
Madam Chair.
Trustee Mosier?
As we do this, I would hope we would pull out the state strategic plan. And I know, and you're probably, I would imagine, way ahead of me on where they're at on that, because they've had a couple of meetings the commission has. I would just like to make sure that as we move forward, we're moving forward in unison, because oftentimes we get battered a little bit if we're not in the state's interest in the strategic plan guides that, I believe anyway.
Madam Chair, Trustee Mosier, I agree. I would like to tell you that I am more in the know of where we are in the status, but I think after our conversation at Northwest College a little while ago, that's really where we're at. One of the things, and maybe I'm jumping ahead, but one of the things that I would propose, and Dr. Schwartfiger actually brought this up by his past experience, is asking community leaders and relevant organizations to come in and present to the Strategic Planning Committee, or probably what I envision being the board and college council, their goals and their visions and where they're going. That would include the city, leads from an economic development perspective, the Chamber of Commerce, but certainly the Wyoming Community College Commission. And I would ask Dr. Rose and most likely Commissioner Atwell to come in and outline those processes as our intent to understand what are the state's interests, what is the direction of the commission. And so that would be one of the components in the information gathering, the environmental assessment, to ensure that when we say these are our goals, they are in tune with not only the goals of the commission, or the state's interests, but are we going in the same place as our economic development strategy for the community, for the city's plan. All those things should inform our strategic planning.
Madam Chairwoman, when we were working on the master plan, the building master plan, we had committees like that, where we had county commissioners and folks from the city, the mayor and stuff on them, and actually works quite well. So if we wanted to do that same sort of thing with a strategic plan, I think that's a good idea.
Yeah, Madam Chair, Trustee Little, the one difference here, and I'm stealing this from a page out of Dr. Pat's book, but the one difference here, instead of just having these people on the committees to help us have the conversation, which I agree will be useful in many ways, shifting it slightly and actually having them come in and say, this is where Leeds is going. This is the economic development strategy for Cheyenne. To inform us so that when we are talking then about what the college should do, we can say, is that in tune with economic development? Is that in tune with city, with county, with the Wyoming Community College Commission? So we would actually ask them to come in and do a formal presentation about their strategic plan, their goals, their direction that they're going.
Thank you, Joe. Dr. Schaefer.
That's fine. So, Madam Chair, so that the general structure, and again, this is a proposal, as I hear more from staff here at the campus, perhaps the language will change, but it's an idea of how we would look to structure and break out the strategic elements of the plan and the operational elements of the plan. The latter portion of this page is really a section of some content that I adapted from a publication that was actually geared towards hospital boards and the engagement of boards in strategic planning for hospitals, and the authors were kind enough to grant us permission to adapt those and reprint those. You can read those 10 elements of strategic planning and what they suggest, but the graph, the little figure is really what I want to point your eyes to, because it summarizes in a visual nature a real simple approach to illustrate where I anticipate the board and the college will collaborate on this process, and then where you will delegate essentially through me, the college, to get this stuff done. So the big thing really is this environmental assessment, and I think one of the things that we have struggled with here at the college, and many organizations do, is that we're so quick to jump into let's do something. And we jump in and say, we're going to do this because it sounds great, or there's another campus doing that. We don't take the time to inform ourselves and truly understand the context and the environment we live in, and whether that's with job market changes, whether that's with the fiscal condition of the state, whether that's with our own performance as an institution. So the very first piece that we will go through is this environmental assessment, this information gathering. And I have a question later on because I want some ideas of how you think we should go about doing that. But that's the big piece. That has to inform all of this stuff and give us the context at which we can create our vision in. From there, the review of the mission, the value statements, setting then the vision statement, identification of the strategic goals. I want that to be, and hope we can find a way for that to be, a collaborative process between the trustees and the campus. Very much integrated in dialogue, conversation, decision, development, all of those things. And I'll ask you there as well, how would you envision the board being involved with that? From there, it's our job then to operationalize this plan. Our annual activities, the way we conduct business, from everything from programs we add, who we hire, what we try to do, partnerships we engender, all of those things will be realized within our operational planning that we do. And we have some units on campus that are still doing a wonderful job of operational planning. Others that have been waiting for some direction. But I think that shows both sort of a time construct, but also the differentiation between the strategic planning process, which is that upper portion, and after the line, what happens internally here in the organization.
Madam Chairwoman, I have Joe, environmental assessment. Can you talk to me about how you envision, what you envision that to look like and how you would even start something like that?
Madam Chair, Trustee Little, I was hoping you would help me with that tonight a little. But I do have some ideas. One component would be getting the community feedback, and part of that would be asking our community leaders and organizations to come in and inform us. So we're starting to assess the environment from those organizations that we see as our key partners and community leaders. There would be some mechanism for soliciting feedback from the internal campus community. Our students, our faculty and staff, and whether we use technology to do that through some social media form, whether it's a traditional survey, whether it's focus groups, I think there's a component for that. There could be a component of more general feedback from the community. You may say, we need to hear just from the broad community out there. Is that a survey? Is it an open house? Is it a town hall type meeting? Could be anything. Certainly, the key performance indicators, both the indicators of effectiveness as well as efficiency that we're developing and right now gathering data on, would give you the data and the evidence of how we think the campus is doing right now. All of those collectively will inform us of the environment in which we're in. And there's probably other things, and that's really why I want to hear from you. What are the other types of activities or strategies we can employ to gather that information and get an understanding of what the environment is?
Madam Chair.
Trustee Kelty?
I'm looking at this list that you pulled from this, I guess this is a book, or it's a white paper here, I see. It says stating assumptions about the future. Doesn't that seem like that's sort of out of order here? That sounds like it's part of the internal and external environments. We're making some assessments about what our environments are going to be in the future. And then identifying the critical strategic issues. It looks like we're drawing conclusions really early here, and I'm guessing that really the conclusions that we're trying to draw from are what's the capability of our organization at the present time, really. If we want to chase some new goals and our organization is not capable, how are we going to build that capability? And things like that.
Madam Chair, Trustee Kilty, I think you are correct, but I would suggest that after we have been informed about the environment, we could at least conceptually think about what the future will hold, what it will entail. And part of that, in terms of trying to draw those assumptions, maybe assumptions of the future that are indeed dependent on our own actions. So it's really the futurist approach into thinking about what could potentially happen and what that environment might look like. Could these steps and these pieces, are these exactly in sequential order? No, they really illustrate more of what the planning entails. On the back page, I do have more of a sequential or chronological timeline, if you will, or process line for what I would suggest for strategic planning. And so I'll walk through that quickly. And again, this is just the place to start our conversations. But the first thing is preparing for planning. We're doing that right now. This conversation is an element of that. Looking at how we would gather information, developing the key performance indicators, gathering those data. We're in that process. The information gathering and assessment, that's that environmental scanning piece then. And that's really one of the very fundamental next things. At the same time or after that, we can go through and do a mission statement and values review. Or we can say, it's great, leave them alone. We'll just skip that process completely. And you'll see I have a question about that. And then we get into the identification of critical issues here. So this is where we have to start thinking and in many ways drawing some assumptions or predictions about the future, but also looking at what the current environment holds, looking at opportunities, looking at things we may or may not be able to do, irregardless if the institution is positioned right now to capitalize on those opportunities or overcome those challenges. That's followed by a conversation about our vision. Okay, so if we're thinking about these assumptions, we're thinking about what the future may hold and all of these things, then we need to craft a vision and say, okay, so knowing that may very well be our future, what's our vision for moving into that future? And that's the development of the vision statement, followed by the strategic goals, and then say, how are we going to know if we actually did these goals? We'll draft a strategic plan, review the draft of the strategic plan, probably through campus-wide communication of it through the trustees. I'm going to ask College Council to consider the plan when it's done, actually make a recommendation to me, it'll come to the board, we'll review it, and then we set it into motion on the campus. That whole process, based on what I've read and my own experience of going through strategic planning, at minimum is 4 months. If we can move through and agree on the mission and value statement, I think we save some time, and I think this is very doable over spring semester and have it done before the end of the fiscal year. And how many people are involved, how it shakes out, that's where some of the timing will actually vary. And then I'll conclude, I have 5 questions there for the board, and some of those you've already been touching on and wanting to think about, but one of the first ones is, from a board's perspective, what do you want to achieve through a strategic planning process? Or what are your expectations regarding this process and the outcomes? That wasn't rhetorical, by the way.
Comments from the board?
Yeah, I'll give it a shot here.
Dr. Kelty?
I'm a physicist and an engineer, so I'm pretty grounded in reality, and mission and vision statements appear to me a lot like describing how you staple jelly on a ceiling. It's a lofty goal, but it doesn't really describe why you're trying to do it or how to go about doing it and so forth. So that all leaves me pretty cold. But the rest of this I can understand. The preparing for planning tonight's fine. Gathering information, very important to get started on that. Beyond that, things become a little less clear, and I just think we should be really flexible in the planning process at that point to go wherever the need seems to drive us. But when I'm talking about capability of an organization, that is strategic planning to me. Is your organization capable of meeting all of the needs that you foresee? And if not, how do you build the capability? And that's really all I have to say about it. It's 4 months, 9 months, but I am sort of bothered by the fact that we seem to be going through this exercise of vision and mission statements on a pretty short cycle now.
Madam Chair, Dr. Kilty, I don't know that I can comment intelligently, but I'll comment anyway, so it probably won't be. And I would agree with that, but I would suggest that short cycle is not a reflection either on the current mission statement, as I stated before, but really on, in many ways, our lack of a coherent, consistent planning process. And so we will review it. It may very well be that we say, yep, looks good, and we're done with it, and it takes 20 minutes to do that. And that may very well be the case to do that. From here, we're really looking at a 3 to 5 year cycle, and in 3 to 5 years, it may again be mission's still relevant, we're still doing what we need to do, and it's a 20-minute conversation. But what I want the campus to get into the habit of is knowing the mission statement, thinking about the mission statement, looking at the mission statement, and making sure that our decisions derive and are created or are funneled through this system that's driven by our strategic goals and strategic plan. And right now, we've got a lot of things that are really cool things going on this campus. Could I tell you that they're all rowing in the same direction to achieve the same thing? Not at all. So we need to provide some type of consistency with it. So I guess I'm not as worried about the frequency of reviewing the mission statement. I think if it's relevant, that review becomes fairly simple. But I do think it's something to build into the process.
Madam Chairwoman, I would like to give my answer to number 1. And I'm using it as, I'm also using the example of how we do things like at work in my office. But there are certain things we want to accomplish. And I think a strategic plan helps us put into words and put into a goal what exactly it is we want to accomplish, whether that be building some new buildings, increasing our enrollment, having a more focus on health education, whatever that is. I'm just using that as an example. But I like Kevin's idea of do we have capacity, kind of a capacity analysis. I think that's part of strategic planning. If we want to accomplish this goal, what do we need to get there? I think part of it is looking also at a strengths-based kind of study, like what Joe talked about, because there's some things that we are very good at, and maybe we can make those like a front page or a headline or a banner of our strategic plan. So what I would like to see out of a strategic plan is the ability to go to the community or to have a conversation amongst ourselves to say, this is where we want to be in 5 years, this is where we want to be in 10 years, and this is the kind of legacy that we want to leave behind for the next administration or the next board. So, and have those in some kind of a measure so that we know when we've accomplished it. That's what I would like to see out of a strategic plan.
Thank you.
Madam Chair,
Trustee Lozier?
I'm going to digress just a little bit as I answer this, but, you know, I've always been caught up in from a business perspective, looking at missions, and I think within the educational environment, we've always toyed around a little bit with mission and vision. But I've always perceived the mission for corporations and entities out there, you're really looking broadly at why they exist. And to me, I think we can talk about the reason for our existence in providing certain kinds of education or educational opportunities. And then I think that we take the next step just as anyone, and it seems to be I always feel it's a little out of order. I think we look at objectives. What measurable outcomes do we intend to achieve? A 20% return on investment or something of that nature? So this is why I get a little confused when I'm in the educational environment, because I tend to think broadly why we're here. Next, what is it we want to achieve within that context? And strategies, to me, are the framework. They're the main branches of the tree that lead us to achieving those outcomes. And so I always have to twist around a little bit to get within the context of the structure that we use in academia. But I guess when I answer your question then, I'm saying I would expect strategic planning to provide us a framework by which we are going to achieve those goals or objectives that, for example, the board might have an objective and the college's objective to improve the quality of instruction in certain areas, or to improve, one of the big things now is to completers and leavers. We really want to focus on completions and degree obtainment. So now, what's the framework we're going to use to achieve that? Because then, as we look at that framework, we have to come up with the resources that allow us to achieve that. If we're going to do it in a different way, well, we can use different resources or levels of resources. But my mind kind of gets caught in that perspective, because that's, you got the physicists over there who can't hang anything on the ceiling, but it's just a difference in the way we view this perspective. But that's my hope, is that we would come with a plan, a strategic plan would give us a framework, how we're going to get to those objectives. So, and setting those objectives too.
Thank you, Ed. Anyone else? Dr. Schaefer, does this help you at all, this conversation?
It is, but Madam Chair, I have 4 more questions. Yes, that is helping me considerably, and I think it's all doable. I don't know that we can get jelly on the ceiling, but the rest of it I think we can accomplish.
Madam Chair,
Dr.
I mean, let's just go down your questions one at a time. Should we consider reviewing the statements? Yes, I guess. I guess that's what I heard here tonight, is that we should look those over. The present ones might not be really what we need. I'll skip over number 3. Number 4, we always talk about engaging outside consultants. I would suggest in this case that we just hold off until we can really focus what that consultant should work on. I don't want to even get involved in talking about consultants until we decide how we're going to use them effectively. They're expensive. $16,000 a month times 6 and all of that, you know. And then let's see here. I'll let it go have somebody comment on number 3 or 5, or comment on the questions I've already commented on.
Okay. Just please give us a minute to look at these
By all
questions, please.
Well, then, during that minute of silence, I'll just continue to talk. Board involvement, we've cut back on committees, so we really could put a committee up for at least the next year, or if we want to, only the next 4 to 9 months to look at this. We've certainly got the committee resources to do that, because the only standing committee we've got at the present time is finance and facilities, yes? All other committees are gone?
At this time, they're gone, and we had actually, some of us had talked about, instead of forming a committee, having a task force, so that when the work was done, then the task force can be dissolved. But I think this is pretty heavy lifting, so I think that we'd probably want to form a committee. How does the rest of the board feel about that?
I agree.
So I agree as well, Carol.
Okay.
Madam Chair, the comment relative to the outside consultant, who would you have in the staff that would be working on this particular effort?
Madam Chair, Trustee Erickson initially, and for this first time around, it would be me, would be my recommendation.
And you're looking for help?
No.
From a consultant, or are you capable with your time frame and so forth to do that?
Madam Chair, Trustee Erickson, I believe I am. I would actually agree with Dr. Kilty's perspective. I know that many people also fondly believe in the value of an external consultant, hence why I posed the question. No, the other thing that will be happening this spring, as you know, we are recruiting for somebody to lead our institutional effectiveness division up. That person will ultimately be charged with helping develop, monitor, and maintain a structure for institutional planning across all levels, and making sure that we're doing that well. That person will come on board this spring, and I anticipate getting significant support from him or her. At least that's what I'll be asking for of the position in the future. I anticipate that he or she will do the heavy lifting in facilitating this process, and the value of an external consultant at that point will be to get an unbiased perspective in facilitating the conversation. I don't know that we need it at this point, and in fact, many of the strategic goals and some of the things that we'll chat about are going to be very internal to the organization and its design, its health, and things like that. So I'm confident in facilitating the process.
Madam Chair, I totally agree with Kevin in terms of waiting in terms of a consultant. I really feel like we have expertise, whether it be Dr. Schaefer or draw from other folks on staff. Plus, when you bring someone in from the outside like that, it's okay. They're talking process, but I think it takes them a while. In my experience in the past, we've brought in people to help us do revise the mission and vision here at least 2 times that I can remember, large activities of doing that and bringing consultants in and spending a significant amount of time on that. And that's okay, but I think we're at a point where we can pursue this for a period of time and do some pretty good work, I think, with the expertise we have here and pulling on some other folks. There may be a time when we say, we need some specific help here in doing some environmental scanning of some type or something of that nature, but at this point, I am into pursuing this with in-house.
Thank you for those comments. I'd like to say that it looks like we're going to be taking baby steps, and it looks like Joe is very capable of beginning those steps. It looks like our mission statement seems pretty much intact and won't take much fixing, but the rest of it, if we want to form a committee, or would you like to start on your own and then form a committee, or would you like the committee to start with you in the process?
Madam Chair, it's a fine question. Actually, understanding whether or not you would have a committee of 1, 2, or 3 trustees that would be that I could easily fold into the the campus component, and I'm still struggling through whether that should be a small group associated with college council or the entire council. I don't want a 40-member strategic planning committee, but if you had a standing committee that could easily be folded into that process, I think that would be very useful for the institution. But we would be just as happy to fold in all 7 of you, and it just comes with the struggles of notification and all that good stuff to make sure the public knows when you are convening. But a standing committee, I think, could be easily folded into the process, and I would say whenever you discuss committees and form those here in the very near future would be a good time.
Okay.
I just like to say, being folded is fine, spindling and mutilating is bad.
Don't use the shredder.
Yeah, the shredder.
Duly noted.
Madam Chair, I guess I'd just like to talk a little bit about number 5. Joe, you've already mentioned some of the approaches that you take to information gathering, and they sounded an awful lot like going out to all identifiable stakeholders in the district and finding out what they thought of the future and what their plans were and what they thought their needs were and things like that. And that sort of pushes us down the road of workforce. I think that pushes us an awful lot down the road of workforce development. And one of the things that I've seen about this campus over 10 years or so is that we do an awful lot of chasing every rabbit that comes out of the brush. And I've often wondered if we don't need a better focus on some other programs that can be just sort of our bread and butter and form a basis for the college. They'd make for good recruiting. They'd make for some sort of continuity and just sort of stability to the campus. And I think about it, we've already got some of these. Roz is here tonight, so I'll plug her program in media. And, you know, it's a great program. It's nationally known, but I think we need some more things. Our equine program is kind of unique, and actually some of our workforce programs are somewhat unique too. But it just seems like we don't have enough of an anchor for various parts of the campus that really separate us from other schools that are all trying to respond to community needs all the time. And responding to community needs will also drive the process of decision-making in a very short term. It'll look more like churning than strategic planning. It'll be tactical and not strategic. So, I don't know, I'd like to think about gathering some information there too. How can we make some focus to various areas on the campus that really set LCCC apart and are stable on into the future?
You know, Madam Chair, Dr. Kilty, I think that's fine. And one of the roles we have as a community college and you have as a board of trustees is not just looking at how the institution is designed to respond to the needs as they emerge, even when they emerge quickly, but to think about what those needs may be down the road. And whether that's through establishing anchor programs or making a necessary investment in really creating a new niche of programming. And as you've heard me comment in the past, manufacturing, engineering, those types of fields, we know there's a need. That need is not likely to go away for the nation. You know, you can make a compelling argument of how that is something that we should strategically try to accomplish with that. But it's a fine line. I will be honest with you. I would be loath to suggest that we look for something that is at odds with the needs of our community, either current or in the future. And I would continue to point back to the fact that 90% of our students come from Laramie County. And so it's a fundamental question of, do we serve those that are here, or do we look for ways to draw people in through an anchor-type program? Those are really your decisions. We're charged with carrying out those decisions, and I think those are all germane to a strategic planning process.
I was just going to mention that I don't necessarily know that looking for focus and longer-term anchoring programs are necessarily antithetical to community needs necessarily.
I agree.
So,
Madam Chair, I tend to think that we have some foundations. I don't know as a program in and of itself, but the college has a strong foundation in providing, I don't want to use the term basic education or general education, but the course offerings in a number of different areas which lead students to having opportunities in then specific programs. as we heard of that, I think a little bit of discussion somewhere the other day in terms of nursing and the change, the 2-year, 3-year program. I think Val was talking about it in some meeting that I was in, and I was really fascinated with the fact that, you're looking at the first year, which is, and again, I'm loath to use the term general education, but coursework, which is critical for those folks and to be successful, no matter what majors they pursue, or whether they're going career tech, or whether they're going to transfer. But I would like to see us find and identify and make sure that focus is there, so that we don't ignore that as we're out there chasing those rabbits coming out of the bushes.
Madam Chairwoman, I want to add too that I would like to see Laramie County School District 1 also as a part of this discussion.
I agree. And so where do we go from here?
And to.
Yes, absolutely.
In Albany County.
And Albany.
Thanks, guys. You're right.
Well, it's easy to forget.
Madam Chair, members of the board, I would ask you to consider this, share with me feedback, let me know if you want to have a conversation about this, in any of the specifics. I will take the information that you've provided me tonight and start to move forward through this planning phase and try to get a plan and come back to you with a more structured timeline, specific activities that I would propose within the strategic planning process, look to your guidance, and if you do form a committee, identify where they might fold in to the process specifically, and we'll start moving ahead. I'm truly interested in getting the organization and having you help us get the organization focused on what it is we need to be doing to become the type of institution that we feel we should become to reflect what our communities need.
Madam Chair, I really agree, and I'm excited about this process, because, Kevin and I get caught talking about budget all the time and finances, and that's an issue that relates back to what it is we're trying to do and how those resources are being utilized. So when you've got a tool like this, that process, I think, becomes more evident, more transparent in terms of seeing what we ought to be doing, and really helps all of us provide better direction, I think.
Thank you. Well, I guess there are 3 things that I'm hearing, and I think Joe is asking us to relay any questions we might have to him when we have a little more time to think about this. I would also like anyone who would like to be on the committee to give me a call so that we can form a committee to work with Joe. And I also think that we can discuss this in some greater depth at our retreat that we're hoping to have in January. Are there any more comments? Dr. Schaefer, anything else you would like us to do for you?
No, Madam Chair, unless there's something from the audience or the public that might want to weigh in on this process, I think we're...
Roz, please.
Hang on, let me get on tonight.
Good job.
Madam Chair, if you just give me the 1-minute mission statement background. I feel like I'm always the historian that comes up here. In February of 2011, Dr. Mazzarelli had just taken over as interim president, and he we've all hated the mission statement like for years. And so one of the first things he did was to get a committee together. But the way he did that was very interesting. He didn't handpick people like so often things like that can happen. We actually had an election and so I was elected by the faculty to be on that committee. And so every faction elected somebody. There was no selection. And we worked throughout February, March, and April. I was really proud of the work that was done. We really made an effort to get back to each of our constituents. We held meetings all over campus, and then we also had some evening meetings in which the community members, we sent out, I think we used Mary Ellen Tass's list of community leaders and brought them out. So I really feel like we did the work to get all of that done. We did the mission statement, value statement, and vision statement. And then in May of 2011, at your board meeting, you voted, you approved that. So maybe the word, I just got a chance to see your questions, maybe the word is not review but reconfirm would be a better way, because I can just hear the faculty going, I thought, we did this already, and I think there's nothing wrong with the new president and new leadership to say reconfirm, but I think you're going to have a hard time finding people who want to serve on this again, because I really feel like we did a very good job of being inclusive and all of that. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Roz. I really appreciate you telling us that piece of history, and actually, if the board could get a copy of the mission, vision, and value statements, I think that would help us a lot.
Madam Chair, members of the board, it is actually in your governance policy, so if you go online to policies.lccc.wy.edu, you have a governance policy that's titled Mission, Vision, and Values.
Perfect.
So it's available.
Okay. So some of our work is already done. Thank you. Okay. Is that it?
Yes,
Dr.
ma'am.
Schaefer? Okay, so we have three things to think about, the board. Okay, the next order of business is, I think that because we don't have much business, or would not have much business at our business meeting on December 19th, that we were thinking that we would cancel that meeting, which I think is actually something that this college does often. Is that correct, Vicki?
We have done in the past, yes, depending upon the business to come forward.
Okay. Is there enough business to have a meeting on December 19th?
Madam Chair, members of the board, I've asked the executive team, their response has been that we don't see any issue with canceling the December 19th meeting. I think the only consideration or concern that's come up is, if I understand correctly, and I don't want to get ahead of your agenda, moving the business meeting in January to the 23rd, not having a study session in January, essentially puts us well over a month before you will meet again. There are some things that we anticipate movement on. One of those is I spoke to you about at one of your last study sessions, the potential expansion of the CTE building to provide us a temporary solution for the welding program. I anticipate some type of information coming forward soon, and perhaps we could just carve out some time during the retreat to do that, but I think that would be the only concern with the time frame. But right now, I don't believe I have anything of substance coming forward that would necessitate a business meeting in December.
Could I get the feeling from the rest of the board what do you think about canceling that meeting?
Madam Chair, I'm an eager beaver. I'm brand new. I haven't been around too long. Not having any meetings at the end of the month, not having a meeting at the study session. My reaction to it is that whatever you choose to do is fine, but I'm ready, roar and go.
And Madam Chair, with your encouragement, I could gladly engage Trustee Erickson in that time and get him up to speed on a few things and use his expertise, if nothing else, with just thinking about the campaign structure and those types of things. So if you're available and if you are eager, I think we have some work that we can certainly engage you.
Well, my last name starts with an E, Eager Erickson. Capital E, eager, yes.
Careful what you wish for, so we're going to talk to you.
You take the lead, sir.
All right.
So does that mean we want to have a meeting?
Madam Chairwoman, are you going to want to set committees then, or are you going to want to wait until January? Or do you want to not think about that right now?
No, I would like to form committees, and so why don't we go ahead and have the meeting? It could be a short one, if we want to do that. Or let me have some more feedback, please.
Just to organize committees, that's kind of a silly reason to have a meeting. You're the boss, you tell us where you want us, and that's that. Then you can just do that on the meeting.
I'm gonna stick up for Bill on this one. Let's cancel the meeting. Doesn't sound like there's a lot of pressing stuff. We'll find some horrible things for Don to do that day, keep him busy. He won't be nearly so eager afterwards.
Beat it out of him.
Trustee Filthy, I'm talking to Joe.
I think I got my answer, so with a little more enthusiasm. So I think we'll cancel that meeting on December 19th, and we'll form our committees. As I said, call me if you want to be on the committee, or let me know after the meeting, and then we'll go ahead and get that started. So the next order of business would be moving the January 16th meeting to January 23rd. How does the...
And what's the reason for that again?
Because I'm going to be gone. I'm so sorry.
Do we not have a meeting on the 2nd, is that?
We do not have a study meeting in January.
So the next meeting would be not until the 23rd.
That is correct.
Depending upon when you hold it.
I think, right, and if I could interject that at this time, I'm sorry, I skipped over the January retreat. There were two dates that we had talked about, and actually the first one would probably be the best, considering how much business we have. January 5th, it would be a Saturday for approximately 3 hours. I'm sorry, did I have that wrong, Joe?
No, you did, Madam Chair, and I failed to inform you, as did your husband, that I'm supposed to be elk hunting with your husband on the 5th and 6th, and because I care about the health of your marriage so much.
I'm sorry, I forgot that.
As did I, which is surprising, to be honest with you. But for the betterment of the institution, if you felt that was the only date.
My husband's mental health is very important to me. Now, I have another suggestion. Could we do it on a Friday? Could we do it on the 4th? I know some of you are still working.
No, I have classes over at UW on Fridays.
You
so
start already by then.
We
Does
gotta be
UW
close.
start?
You're talking sometime after the 5th of January.
Well,
Are you talking the 4th?
I'm talking the 4th, Friday the 4th.
Friday the 4th would work for me.
Brenda, thank you. Dr. Kilty. Is that something you need to think about? Would that...
Yeah, Carol, I would just need to check my
Sure.
work
your schedule.
calendar. I can't think of anything right off the top of my head that would keep me from doing that, but I would just need to make sure.
And that would allow people to have their weekends free instead of tying up a weekend.
All right, Madam Chairwoman, are you talking about having a whole day or half day?
No, about a half day.
Half day, like in the afternoon or something?
In the morning, afternoon, whenever
Okay.
we pin it down.
Okay.
And Madam
That
Chair,
work?
where would it be held?
Right here. Okay, I think it's hinging on Trustee Little. I think everyone else, is everyone else able to attend that day? Okay.
Madam Chairwoman, I would say go ahead and schedule it, because I can't think of anything off the top of my head that's going on, so let's just go ahead and schedule it.
Okay, and would it be better for you in the morning or the afternoon?
That I need to, let me check on that and get back with
Just so you don't start at 7.
No, we will not.
My preference would be 6. We didn't start at 7, Bill.
AM or PM?
Are you looking at tentatively around 9 a.m.?
We're thinking probably 8 or 9 to about noon. No meals included. We'll see. Okay, Vicki will let us know the times and after she hears from you.
Yeah, so Carol, you want me to get a hold of Vicki? Okay.
Thank you.
I'll check tomorrow, Vicki.
We need to check with Christine, too.
Yes.
We'll handle that.
Okay, that would be great. Okay, so
So the 16th is gone, and the 23rd is the meeting.
is that acceptable to the rest of the board?
Yes.
Yes, I just want to, Madam Chairman, would it serve any purpose, given the time frame that we're not having a meeting in December, could we do the retreat in a study session? Would there be the need for that? Any value in that? I'm just throwing it out there.
Yeah, Madam Chair, Trustee Mosier, you're suggesting that the retreat is a retreat/study session?
Well, either that or we could call a study session to order after the retreat or prior to, if we needed to conduct something at that point.
Yeah, Madam Chair, Trustee Mosier, if I understand correctly, and Vicki will correct me if I'm not understanding correctly, that essentially the retreat is essentially a study session. We still have to notice it, it's still open, all of those things, and so it's just a longer one, perhaps, to do that. So I think we can still satisfy both needs if they arise.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I think some of the business that I would like to conduct during that retreat, I would like to get Marty Cizik back on the phone and discuss our evaluation of the board, which I mentioned at that meeting that we had Marty on the phone, so that we can really give it a little more of our care. And then more of the strategic plan. And then if there's anything else that the board would like to discuss at that meeting, please let us know. Let me know, or let Joe know, and we'll include that.
Could we discuss at that point the need for particular committees that we might?
Yes.
And again, I know we wouldn't be appointing, but we could discuss which committees and talk about, who might like to serve on those.
I think that's a great idea.
That is a good idea.
Anyone else have anything they'd like to discuss at that meeting? Well, just let me know. We can get it on the agenda.
One quick thing, put WACCT on there, because there may be something with the legislative agenda that is in addition at that point we might need to talk about.
I would really like to have some talking points for the board for when we go meet with the legislature, because I think we all have to know what we want and how we're going to accomplish it.
Madam Chair, Trustee Mosier is going to say it, so please.
Go ahead, Trustee Mosier.
WACCT and with Steve Boehner, those are being worked on. We had a phone conversation here a week ago. John still served. I want people to know that he went out of his way. He came over and we had a phone meeting because he was still chair at that time of the WACCT group, and in particular the advocacy group, which is made up of one trustee from each of the 7 community colleges. And we had a phone conversation with Steve Boehner regarding that legislative agenda, and that's why I think this would be a good time to continue, because Steve was going to do some things, and he'll be sending out, some of you, I think all of you received a WACCT newsletter today, and so we'll follow up with some of those things.
So would it be valuable to have Steve Boehner come to the meeting for about a half hour to discuss the literature with us?
Only if he's far enough along with that and can bring an agenda, but I would be happy to speak with him, or Joe, I know has contact, we could check and see if there is value in doing that.
Okay.
But he has something.
Thank you.
Madam Chairman, the legislature starts like January 8th or 9th, I think, January 8th, so there will be a lot of bills filed by the time we have our retreat. Not all, but there will be several, so he should have a pretty good idea of what's going to happen by that time.
This is Madam Chair, if I could talk a little bit more about WACCT, and one of those things that has come up. There is a bill which will probably be pre-filed by, I think, Ken Escabel. And that bill speaks to a statewide mill levy, which is a very controversial topic. And it may not move ahead. He may not take it ahead. I'm not sure. Steve's not sure. But I would just simply want you to be aware that there's discussion, or at least comments on that out there at this point in time. And that is, of course, for higher ed, the question we have, and I don't know if Steve has had a chance to talk to Ken about that, whether that is strictly for operations or is that 1 mil for capital construction. I don't know. I've been wanting to try to give Ken a call and see what's going on. If some of you have touched base with him, you might ask about that. Is anything you would want to add to that?
No, you're good.
Thank you. Okay, I would like to know if anybody from the public or anyone in the audience would like to say anything else this evening?
Madam Chair, I do have one thing I want to draw your attention to, and today in the mail, we received the notification of the Wyoming Community College Commission's meeting on December 19th. At this meeting, they will be considering tuition. Trustee Erickson, I think you know this, but just in case you don't, fees are the domain of the institutions. The Wyoming Community College Commission actually considers and sets tuition for the 7 community colleges. We received this today. It outlines the general parameters in which they consider tuition. There is an analysis using both median household income as well as tuition rates comparative within the WICHE states, the western states that are part of the Western Interstate Commission on Higher Education. We have not, as presidents or as institutions, and I don't believe as trustees, had any opportunity really to have a conversation with the commission regarding tuition setting and tuition levels. I could not tell you what their intention is. It suggests in there with certain parameters that up to 5% increase may happen. I'm ill-informed. I will spend some time tomorrow trying to understand where their consideration is and what's going on, and maybe you know more, but I do intend to provide some type of feedback to the commission considering tuition. Would love to have that feedback informed and blessed by you, so it's something I might encourage you to spend some time with and then get back with me. I don't know where your stance is on tuition and tuition increases, and again, it's not our domain, but I believe we have a very strong and purposeful voice in that because it's affordability for the students that come to our institution. And so there's a lot there. I haven't, like I say, I don't have it all, but I think it's something we should probably consider, or you should help me consider in regards to giving feedback to the commission.
Madam Chair,
Yes, Trustee Mosier.
just as a little history on that, some of you would remember perhaps that the commission raised significantly some years ago the tuition, and they felt they had to do that because they had not raised it for a few years. So if you go back, I think it's roughly 3 years, it might be maybe a year before that, they basically set a kind of a guideline for themselves that said, we're going to raise it incrementally every year so we don't get in a position where we have to raise it by a significant amount as they had done in that prior time frame. So, we, as trustees, in the 2 years I've been involved, we have at different times, you would see a difference in schools. Ours was one of those colleges that had, as trustees, had asked for no increase, but other schools had, and I don't need to mention those, just what our perspective was at that point. I don't know where we should be, and that's something we should talk about.
Yeah, and Madam Chair, members of the board, so you know my perspective at this point, considering increasing the cost of attendance and passing that on to our students, just because we don't rank where the rest of the states do or because we haven't raised it, I would have a very, very hard time supporting that. And to this point, in my understanding of Wyoming and of LCCC, I can tell you I would look very unfavorably on increases in tuition to our students, irregardless of where we rank in comparison to Colorado or the western states for that. I think there are considerable indicators and some strong justification to suggest that we have efficiencies that can be gathered in the system, and at the very least, any increase that we would pass on to students should come in concert with our own work in finding those efficiencies. And so not being part of the conversation, and I don't know, it could be that I'm just new and I missed it, and I'll tell you that, but not knowing where the commission is at and what they're doing with this, I don't know how to provide that feedback yet. I will find out, but I can tell you, in this era of increasing costs for our students, if we are at the bottom of the western states in terms of how expensive it is for our students in regards to tuition, I say that's a good thing. And unless there is some overwhelming, compelling reason that we need to pass a greater expense on to our students, I'd say they gotta, I'm a skeptic, and I will have to be won over to raise that support. And all in the context that my vote really doesn't matter in that, but I would hope that my voice does.
Thank you, your voice does. Dr. Schaefer. Is there any other business? I wanted to tell you that I was at the vigil last night that we held in conjunction with Casper College at 7 o'clock, and it was quite a moving event. For those of you who were there, I appreciated that attendance, and for those of you who weren't there, I know you were doing what we have to do. It was kind of a last-minute event, so last thing I'd like to say is thank you, Board, for having the faith in me to elect me as your chair, and I will adjourn the meeting.